and welcome to the intro to limited prep events, particularly limited prep events in terms of speech. So we'll mainly be covering extemp and impromptu since you did learn about Parley yesterday. So once again, a little bit about me. I'm going to be a senior this year at DHS. I'm currently the captain of extemp and impromptu. I qualified for the state championship in parliamentary debate, and I was also did the national debate in World Schools debate. Me and Alex were both on the same team. And in my past, I've done Parley, extemp, imp, and I've also done some Congress, though I prefer the other three. So what's the benefit of doing limited prep events? First, in my opinion, they're just fun, but there are a lot of benefits that come from having to prepare and learning to improvise speeches. As this article down there tells you from here, there are a lot of benefits to learning improvisation. You can prepare yourself better for real world situations. There will be times when you have jobs and you'll have to be able to respond to things that you may not have the best knowledge of, and being able to know how to accurately create good, well-rehearsed speeches to prepare you for the times where you may not be fully prepared to discuss and engage in a topic is actually really important. And as well, there's also research that suggests that learning to improvise can help reduce social anxiety and being able to talk to other people, and also improves imagination. And also, just in order to be prepared for these events, you have to learn a lot about a decent amount about current events. And so it also helps just increase your knowledge of general topics in general. So first, extemporaneous, or as I like to call it, a pit of hell. It's a 30-minute prep time for a 7-minute speech. So you will when you do an extemp speech, you will walk up, they will give you the option to choose between 3 different topics. And you pick one, you go and you prepare for 30 minutes, and then you enter your room and you'll give a 7-minute speech based off the question you receive. Generally, there will be 2 different types of extemp. There's national, which covers US related topics, and international, which covers some US foreign policy and topics from all over the world. To give you an idea, for the state championship that was going to happen this year for extemp, the topics were the Americas, Africa, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. So it pretty much can cover anything. And more often than not, the topics cover political or economic issues happening around. Sometimes there will be social issues, but generally it falls more into political and economic. So this is the formula for an extemp speech. It looks pretty complicated, but to some degree, you kind of have to think about an extemp speech and impromptu speeches a little bit like an essay. So you start out with the attention-getting device. Now, I don't know exactly if you guys have learned in some of the other presentations, but I'll kind of just go over everything like it's new. The attention-getting device is something you put at the beginning of your speech in order to draw in the listener. So when the judges, when they have to listen to 6 or 7 straight extemp speeches, they can get kind of bored. So having an introduction that is useful and that can draw them in is actually really important. And it sometimes has to be completely unrelated to the actual prompt, as long as you can link it in, which is the second step, link it into the actual topic that you have at hand. So for example, if I'm talking about the wildfires that were happening in Australia, I could make some attention-getting device, I don't know, I'm just gonna make it up, about yogurt or something. And if I draw in my conversation about yogurt and I link it into the conversation about Australian wildfires, it can help make the judges more interested. So afterwards, then you tend to include a little bit of background on the issue at hand. So if I'm talking about Australia wildfires, I'll talk a bit about climate change and how it has impacted the biodiversity of the region. I'll talk about how poor regulations on campground fires and smoking in the wilderness led to a lot of these fires starting. And then you go to your statement of significance, which is basically, why do we care about the topic? Why is it that I care about the Australian wildfires? And then that's when I'll talk about climate change. I'll talk about threatening biodiversity in Australia and the needs for clean water that the fires have threatened. And then you go to your question, which is then when you talk about what the actual question is. So if the question is, what do we do about Australian wildfires? Then I provide my answer. And you generally want to provide your answer as kind of one sentence combined with 3 subpoints, which is point 1, point 2, and point 3. and then you'll mention what the 3 points are kind of in your roadmap. And then for each individual point, it's almost like a mini essay paragraph. You want to start out with your topic sentence, which is kind of just your claim. And then you'll have your warrant, which is basically the explanation for why the claim is true. And your analysis is why is it important, which is in each analysis, you bring back the talking about that particular point back to the question and the topic and like how you respond to the actual problem at hand. And you'll do that 3 times generally. And then you go back to, then you finish with a conclusion in which you'll try to restate the question, the answer, and the 3 points you've made. And then generally you want to link it back to your original attention getting device. And then you just sort of finish. I don't think I've ever had a conclusion that I was entirely happy with. Actually, I've had a couple, but in general, the conclusion is by far the least important part. The most important part generally is the introduction, because that's when the judge is going to be the most alert. And I know that this looks kind of like scary at first. When I first did XM speeches, I don't think I did half of this. I just focused on the attention getting device, the background, the question, and then the 3 points. And also traditionally in XM speeches, you will use a lot of sources. So when I do mine, I generally try to include at least like 6 or so sources from different news articles to provide evidence. I'll put 1 in the introduction and a couple in each point. And when you start out, generally you just want to try to introduce sources in through like maybe 1 or 2. And then as you get better, you build them up. Same way as you get better, you can build up more elements of the speech as you learn how to do an XM speech better. So when I enter an XM room, I don't intend to spend the full 30 minutes writing out the speech, because you need to practice when you're doing limited prep speeches. You always need to practice your speech before you actually give it. So the ideal is that you spend half of the time prepping the speech, and then you spend half of the time just rehearsing your speech so that you can get 2 times through before you actually enter your room. Generally, when I started out, I found that it was difficult to write the speech in 15 minutes. So I would spend about 23 to 26 minutes in the room prepping, and then I'd try to give 1 practice speech quickly if I can. Luckily, XDemp is one of those speech events where they always run somewhat late. So you'll more likely than not every single time have a little more prep time than 30 minutes, but it is useful to be able to be prepared on the 30-minute dot. So yeah. Then just national versus international XDemp. So these are some of the topics that you can cover in national versus international. I mean, I've mainly done international, but I've seen ones about US election. I've done ones on energy. I have done a lot on US foreign policy because that goes into both. For international, I think I've done ones on most of those topics. For a lot of them, each round will be themes. You'll do a round on, if it's national, you'll do a round on healthcare, and if it's international, you'll do a round on like India or something like that. And all the topics will be geared around that particular idea. And so there's a very wide variety of ones. And here, I'll show you. So these are some of the sample prompts from the NSDA website. So as you can see, they're not easy things sometimes to talk about. And a lot of the time you'll go in, and of the 3 topics, you'll barely know 2 of them, and you'll somewhat know 1 of them if you're lucky. Especially with international XDemp, because there's just so much stuff that happens in the world. But I'll talk later about what you do when you don't know anything about your topic. But yeah, if you want to see some of these, and if you want to write one down, you can, just to have one in your head. But yeah. All right. So now impromptu. Impromptu is somewhat like XDemp, except not really at all. With impromptu, you give us 5-minute speech, but you only get 2 minutes to prepare. And the topics are nothing like XDemp. With XDemp, you're mainly covering political and economic topics. And with impromptu, you cover topics of all different sorts. They range from 1 word to quotes from ancient people to quotes from modern day people to actual like political type questions to just like comments about life. And ultimately the goal of each impromptu is to take whatever topic you have and use it to kind of push for something. You push for some objective, or you create some story, or you try to use background knowledge you already have to create a speech that's like fundamentally unique and pushes for something that maybe is not even in the original prompt. So formula for an imp speech is actually kind of similar to an extemp speech. You have your attention getting device at the beginning. You link it into your thesis, which is kind of your main, like, what are you taking away from the prompt? So for example, if my prompt is, I don't know, if my prompt is chair, or I could like say that whenever I'm tired, like my attention getting device could be whenever I'm tired at school, I go home and the first thing I do is plop down in my like family's recliner chair and I lose all my stress, and then I link it to my thesis. And my thesis that I take away from chair is that everybody needs to relax every now and then. And then I would go into my roadmap and I'd say, okay, relaxing, we'll talk about how anxiety in teens is becoming a growing issue. Then we'll talk about, you can like bring up some example of some person who didn't relax enough, and you can then you link whatever you have as your kind of prompt into the sort of moral or idea that you want to push, and then you go into your points. There's a variety of ways you can create an imp speech. I'll go over that next, but like the points for an imp speech. But for your points, it's sort of the same thing. You have your claim, your warrant, your impact, much like an essay, and you have to provide your logic throughout for why each individual point is important to the thesis, and to prove once again why the thesis is important in general. And then for the outro, much like extemp, you go back and you recap what the topic is, you recap what your roadmap was, so the 3 points, and then you kind of do your call to action saying, here's like, if it's like a political issue, you could say, here's what you could do to solve this. If it's like relax, you can say like, make sure that when you're stressed that you relax or something, and then you tie it back to whatever your attention getting device is. And then I could say like if I had not had that chair to help me relax every single day, I don't know what I would have been able to do. But one important thing to do in your points is that when you create your thesis, it's likely to be very different from your prompt. But in each individual point, you do want to go back to the original thesis. And you also want to go back to the original prompt. So if I have chair as my prompt, in each individual point, I want to talk about the thesis, which is like relax. And then I also want to mention the prompt and be like chair, and like say like this anxiety could have been solved by like this person's version of the chair, like this person's ability to relax, but they didn't, or something like that. So there's different ways to make a good imp speech. This probably looks a lot more complicated than it is. So basically, when you're creating an argument, there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. So one of the first ways is just like an analysis. So if I have like, let's just stick with chair. So if my thing is relaxing, if theory and application, I would be talking about how like in theory, humans get very anxious, and humans are unable to focus a lot of the time because of anxiety and stress, and that it has negative health effects. And then for application, I can say when we implement ways that we help ourselves calm down and relax, it has immense benefits. So you can do it like that. If it was individual and institution, I could say I as an individual suffer from a lot of stress because of school and because of college essays and SAT. And then I could go into institution and I could say, well, people at work are more stressed out than ever. The average teen has the same level of anxiety as like a 1950s mental patient. And I can do it like that. And I can talk about like the individual and then the problems in the institution. That one's a little bit less common. The most common ones are the 3 lessons and the 3 lenses. So the 3 lessons is just like something you can learn, and you provide like for the chair one, you could just say like, be smart, be kind, be brave, or sorry, not. If it was for the chair one, you can say relax, and then you talk about the 3 lessons that can be learned from the chair. For argumentative structure, your you're basically saying, okay, if like the chair represents relaxing, then we have what is the cause of all the stress? So I say like, in my first one, I say, okay, increased workloads in school, like more technology is the cause. And then the effects, I say, okay, people are becoming more stressed out. And then I say, oh, well, the solution to that is to have everybody have their own chair and be able to find ways to relax beyond just the typical solutions like sitting in front of a TV. Or problem cause solution is pretty similar. Like, what is the problem, what caused it, and how do we solve it? For three lenses, this is the one I used the most when I was beginning. For this one, if we were talking about chair and relaxing, I would provide three examples of like relaxation. I mean, if like for historical, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if I could think of like some person who was way too uptight and was always too stressed out and ended up being their detriment, like somebody who ended up having like a heart attack at a young age because they were too stressed. Or cinematic, I don't know, I could talk about like the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland and how he's always super freaked out and he's unable to relax. You apply things that you know, like stories you've heard in history or cinema or literature or even the real world. Like you can talk about your own personal experiences. In fact, like talking about your own personal experiences is almost always a really good like thing to do in impromptu because it provides just the judges with some level of personal connection that other people may not be able to give. And so then you provide the three lenses on the issue as kind of a way to like prove your point. So if my original point is to relax and like just take a break, and I could provide a historical example of somebody who didn't take a break, a cinematic example of somebody who did take a break, and I could provide a real world example of how we could be better about taking breaks or something like that. For using your time, like XSTEM, you get three different topics to choose from. When you enter the room, the judge will hand you a slip of paper with three different topics. And for me, I always pick my topic within 10 seconds of getting them because when you only have 2 minutes, you need to spend as much of that time as you can actually planning what you're going to talk about. And even if you're not entirely sure which topic's the best, it's better to pick one quickly than to spend 30 seconds thinking about it and then only have a minute and a half to create your speech. Once you have your topic, you can think about, okay, what type of speech do you think works best? Like if it's one that you know, think immediately, okay, I have three really good historical examples of this, then maybe you make it a three lenses one. If you say, oh, I know exactly how I can make this a really good one about like something that we need to solve, but you could do like a problem, cause, solution. And then traditionally you're allowed to use paper when you prep, and if it's online, you definitely will. Then you can kind of prepare, you can write out like a little quickly, like, okay, here's my attention getting device. I'll be talking about this story. And then you write down, okay, this is the first point I want to make. This is the second point I want to make. This is the third one. And then you really quickly write down a little outline. So that way you don't forget your like points while you're doing a speech. Because when I first began impromptu, there were times where I would be giving my speech and I would forget my third contention. I'd just sit there for a second trying to find another one I could make up as quick as possible. And that's not a good way to get a good ranking from the judge. So the other thing is just make sure you're starting as best on time as possible. Just one, so other people aren't late. And then also, if the judge sees you sitting there like 10 seconds after he said time's up, it may just reflect poorly on you. So here's some just like sample impromptu prompts. I don't know why I have that picture there. Anyway, I mean, tree, yogurt, chair. I talked about some of those. So it can be things like one word questions. It can be these, I just picked 3 random Chinese proverbs, or like 3 random questions that cover really big topics. Impromptu prompts at like some of the smaller, like just league tournaments that we go to, they'll typically have generally the same style of prompts every single time you go. But when you go to tournaments that are run by different groups, you can get a whole variety of topics, and you honestly do not know what to expect. I mean, I've argued like everything in impromptu. I've argued like ancient Japanese proverbs. I had to make an entire speech off the name like Bernie Sanders before. I've done ones like cookie. I'm pretty sure I've done one about like fuck, what was I gonna say? I think I did one about like ancient Egyptians believing in pyramids and stuff. So it's a very wide variety of things you can get, and you don't always know what to expect. So this is one probably more than XSTEM where the ability to improvise is really important.
At Nationals one year, there was an entire round that was country singers, just the name of an obscure country singer for
Yeah.
every single prompt, for every single person.
Yeah.
Like, you'll never know what you're going to get. That's the thing about the event.
It's a very you genuinely do not know what to expect. I mean, I would not be surprised. Generally, if you do novice and stuff, and you're going to some of the beginning ones, the topics will be a little bit less obscure than like country singers. But you can get ones about celebrities. You can get ones about just like everyday items. You can get ones about like famous quotes. It really just it's all over the place. For XSTEM, please don't make stuff up. I know that it'll be really tempting when you're first beginning to say like, oh, I really want to save this, but I feel like it should be sourced. It's better to just not include sources than to try to make sources up. In part because if you get into the better levels of XSTEM, you can people will actually, like when you get to the like elimination rounds, people will actually check your sources after the speech saying like, oh, okay, so you said this and you quoted this source. Can I see the website you got it from? For XSTEM, typically, I don't know exactly what our situation is this year. I know last year, like me and Alex and Cedric and some of the people who did XSTEM, we had these applications called XSTEM Genie, where we were able to download. I think I have like 500,000 sources on my computer of just random news sources from all over the place. And so every time I went into one, if they don't let you use the internet, which a bunch of tournaments don't, though this year, probably with the online tournaments, you'll always be able to use the internet because they just can't check.
Yeah, it's internet prep across the board because there's no enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, but if you ever like, if next year or the year after, if you guys still are doing XSTEM, if any of you are, and you ever run up into an instance where you do have no online prep, you can use files for XSTEM that you save. You can just save your own personal ones. You can use something like XSTEM Genie or PrepD, where they just download a lot of sources for you. And for XSTEM, you generally want to pull up a couple articles, find ones that are as close to your topic as possible. And if in XSTEM, if you get one like, I don't know, say you have like a topic, you have a round about topics in Africa, and you don't know much about Africa, and all of a sudden you get one about like, how do we solve the crisis in Somalia? Just even if you don't know all the details about what's happened in Somalia, you can use some general assumptions. It's a country in Africa. If there's a crisis, odds are it's in extreme poverty. You can use knowledge of what you know about Africa to make safe presumptions. Say like, okay, these are generally things I know about, and if you can't find enough sources, try to at least provide as much information about things you do know to make it as relatable as possible. But don't just like purely make stuff up. So in general, for limited prep events, there's generally the trick is that you just don't have as much time. For a lot of the other speech events you have, I mean, for OO, OA, POI, like all the other ones for POI, you have weeks and months to prepare your speech, to practice the hand motions, to practice the inflection in your tone, to figure out whether or not there are sources you need to reorganize. Like for all the acting ones, you have time to like basically create an entire play within the 10 minutes. But with XSTEM and impromptu, you don't have much time. And so you can use, I mean, the biggest trick for doing well in a limited prep event is that when you have so little time, you have to be really good about how you use it. You need to be able to be very confident about the amount of time you have to prep. So if you have a 2-minute prep time for impromptu, you need to make sure that every time you are walking into that room, you have a basic idea of what you're going to do when you pick up the paper. And same thing for XSTEM. When you get your 3 topics, you want to make sure you know like exactly how you're going to prepare for each one. You know, you have like your files ready or your computer ready to go. You have a piece of paper, maybe when you begin, or even I still do this. You can have like, you can put down on the paper beforehand, you can say, okay, here's where I'll put down the topic. Here's where I'll put down the information for the background. Here's where I'll put down the information for each source. And that way you can be able to just prepare a lot better. And again, for extemp in particular, make sure you're practicing your extemp speech before you enter the room. Because if you go in and you've been prepping for 30 minutes, you may have a good speech, but if you haven't prepared, the odds that you are going to just completely flubber up at some point are very high. Because you'll always find that there will be things that you just weren't entirely prepared for when you prep the speech. And if you get a chance to do it beforehand, you can think, oh, okay, I have a very weak link here, or I don't know what to say in this particular instance. And you have a chance to at least think, okay, is there some way I can cut out this little part, or is there some way I can make an edit so that it will work better? The biggest thing for limited prep is that speak with confidence. Even if you know absolutely nothing, the judges are impressed by somebody who can enter. I mean, the judges are, to be perfectly honest, the judges are mainly parents. You'll mainly be running, unless you go to really good tournaments, you'll mainly be running into judges who are parents who had to take time out of their weekends to come to these events. And they're honestly, a lot of them are impressed at you for being able to be there and be able to do these events despite the incredibly difficult constraints that come with doing limited prep speaking. And so if you're able to speak with confidence and smile and really add emotion to your speech, it makes them very impressed in you, and it will do a lot, because the odds are, if you don't know your topic that well, the odds that somebody else in your room, or a couple people, or everybody else don't know their topic that well are very, very high. And if you're able to enter the room and speak with confidence, you might be doing something that 4 out of the 7 people in the room are not doing. And it can jump you up a lot, even if you aren't really entirely prepared to address the topic. Because even those, like these events that I've mentioned, are less about the speaking and the acting as much about the content to some degree. There's a lot of it that comes just down to basic speaking abilities and being able to speak with a lot of confidence and being able to speak with like just the ability to know what you're doing. And for the last thing for limited prep, which is honestly true for every other event, is tell a story. I mean, when the judges are there, I've already said, they're most likely parents who had to wake up early on their weekends when they were going to rest from work and drive their kids out to this place where everybody's just talking to each other in rooms for an entire day. And the judges are bored, most likely. A lot of them are bored, and they want to have something when they enter these rooms that will really entertain them and make it feel like it was worth coming to judge. And so when you're able to make your speeches less just about like addressing the topic and leaving, but as much as like telling a story, it really, really resonates. Like, I remember I did a topic a while ago for International Extemp on Tunisia, and it was probably one of my best extemp speeches I ever gave. And I spoke through the entire way, and I did a really good job in this particular speech of making the story of how Tunisia became a democracy from a dictatorship. I made it a very compelling story, and I like told it the way you kind of tell a story, with like the beginning, the middle, the end. And my like attention getting device worked very well. And I remember like the guy, when I was like finishing up, the guy said, like looked at me, and then he looked down at his paper and he said, huh, I was so like engrossed in your story, I forgot to even take down notes. And when somebody says that, you know you're leaving that room with a really good score. And I ended up getting first in the room. So being able to tell a story and create a narrative that the judges can follow, and that the judges can suddenly understand perhaps really complex topics that you're talking about with ease, it resonates with the judges, and it's really good. So I think that's about it for this presentation. Yeah. So there are questions. All right. Okay, so do you get to choose if you do international or international? Did Alex already answer this? Yeah, so at most tournaments, there will be a national and an international extemp like separation. There will be some tournaments where the thing is both international and national, and there will generally be called just extemp or mixed extemp. And for those ones, it's a little bit iffy, but generally when they do the mix, the topics aren't as niche as when it's separated. So if it's international for mixed extemp, I've generally found that the topics are not quite as specified as when it's just an international.